The big story, of course, Joe Burrow's calf. That might not be the season-long story. It's the preseason story.
I wonder if he's there today. You can talk to him as a fellow calf injury sufferer.
I could probably give him some advice.
Right.
Yeah. I, too, have missed time due to the calf. Mm-hmm. Phantom calf. Let's start the 15 minutes.
Yeah.
His might not be a phantom. I saw him in pain.
Right.
It might hurt a little bit.
Yeah, he limped off the field having pulled his calf.
So Bengals 12-4 last year in a 17-game schedule somehow. Projected wins is 11.36. Sorry, I'm just somebody. I don't know. Were they 12-4 or 13-4? Or 12-5 or 13-4? I don't remember.
I mean, you just out here.
Did we throw out the last game?
Lighting up
the Ravens, maybe?
The production staff. This is probably how Colin Cowherd's going to go after saying that Dwayne Haskins can't win a Super Bowl.
Oh, gosh.
There's some poor production guys getting fired at the end of that.
Our guys won't. Our guys are great.
No, we don't have the power to fire anybody.
But the Bengals went to the Super Bowl in 2021 and then lost in the AFC Championship. Close game, of course, with the Chiefs on the way to the Super Bowl win that the Chiefs had. So, can the Bengals get back to the AFC Championship and beyond? Can this be the year that they go to the Super Bowl? Win the Super Bowl?
It can be.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Will it be? Who knows?
So what's changed here? Like last year, let's start in the offense again. Last year, the big talk was how they somewhat cheaply shored up their offensive line. Now, as they got into the playoffs, injuries mounted, including left tackle Jonah Williams, and it pretty much looked like the previous year's offensive line once they got into the playoffs, maybe a touch better. This year, though, again, going into the season, Orlando Brown Jr. comes in to play left tackle. Jonah Williams moves to the right side. There was just an article yesterday. Paul Daner, what do you got here? You got something to say?
Well, the Bengals and the Bills had a game that was called off. That's why they had 12-4.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize to our team. I knew I must have misspoke somewhere.
So it's us that are the idiots. Not.
Oh, it's definitely me.
Not the production staff.
I'll get fired.
Yeah, well, maybe.
Eli and Tyler will do the show.
Sounds good. Well, why don't we just make that switch now? You can go into the booth.
I'll go to the booth.
Eli can come in here, sit in the chair, and we'll do the podcast.
I apologize. I do apologize to the group, to everyone, to all of our listeners for making that mistake. So I think this could be the best Bengals offensive line. So Paul Daner Jr., we'll see him at practice today.
Is he a junior?
I think so. Yeah. PDJ, I call him.
PDJ.
He had an article about Jonah Williams settling into the right side and how he'd been looking good there at practice. Reports were good. I always have my concerns about players moving from the left side to the right side 4 or 5 years into their NFL career. Not like year one coming out of college, but 4 or 5 years. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. But if he settles in at right tackle, Orlando Brown Jr. at left tackle, Alex Kappa, and they've got a good squad. Ted Karras, they've got a good offensive line. We know about the playmakers: Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon's back. If they could all stay healthy, make it a little bit easier to get through the AFC and maybe even win a Super Bowl if the offensive line can stay intact this year.
Yeah, and maybe the most loaded wide receiver group in the NFL. And everyone focuses on just the top three: Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. But the guys that they've drafted have been making plays in training camp. Charlie Jones, who I maintain, it makes no sense. There's no pathway for this to happen, but I feel like that guy's going to have a useful contribution in his rookie season. Like, he's going to make some plays that are going to be important for them. But Andre Iosivas, the Princeton wide receiver, has been making a ton of plays as well, and has gone from here's an afterthought that might not make the squad, to maybe this is a reason that they can move on from T. Higgins in the future. Like that, those are the sort of reports or talk that is going around with that guy. Irv Smith Jr., tight end, this perennial, if he could just stay healthy type of guy. I love the Bengals' approach over the last couple of years of let's just take some flyers at reclamation projects at tight ends, knowing that Joe Burrow is a god and can turn anybody into a pretty decent looking tight end if he's got skills, if he's got the ability to run, to athleticism. There'll be opportunities for that guy.
I'm with you, because it's their fourth option, right? I mean, the top 3 receivers will be the number 1 options, and there'll be a game where Irv Smith might have 8 catches, and he happens to be the guy that's open because of something that happened schematically. I'm also with you on Charlie Jones. Again, the more we watched him, and crushing Big Ten corners. But in Andre Eusebius, the insurance policies that they've built at receiver, if the camp hype is legit for both of those guys, it could help both tactically this year as wide receiver 4 potential, but also future-proofing the roster. We use the word future-proofing a bunch for them because a lot of their draft picks have been guys like Miles Murphy, who on the defensive side of the ball, who might not have to contribute right away, but a cheap option at an expensive position to just jump into the rotation. Miles Murphy, Trey Hendrickson, they've got some good options up front defensively. Anything else about the Bengals offense before we move to the defensive side of the ball? I think they're going to be explosive. They're going to be great. I think Burrow has settled in as QB 1, 2, or 3, depending on how you want to rank them.
Yeah, it should be a really good unit again. I think Orlando Brown Jr. as an acquisition was a really great piece of opportunism for the Bengals. Like, they didn't go into the offseason expecting that to be a thing that they were interested in. It's just all of a sudden Orlando Brown's market wasn't there, and they lost a couple of players they were probably anticipating on keeping and decided to move the money around and go after him. And so now you bring him in, should be a significant upgrade. Even if Orlando Brown is not an all-pro or whatever, he's better than Jonah Williams was last year, and probably better than Jonah Williams has ever been in the NFL. But Williams himself should be an upgrade over what was at right tackle last year. Like, even if he plays like he did last season, it's probably an upgrade. And if he goes anywhere near his previous baseline, it will be a reasonably significant one. Kappa, Karras, those guys were solid. The only other question mark is, what does Cordell Volson look like year 2? He struggled, year 1, but we liked him as a prospect coming out. If he takes a step forward, like, that line could be pretty good. So overall, I think the offense should be a very, very good unit. And then the only question mark is, how serious is this calf injury that Joe Burrow is dealing with? Like, we joke about it because yours was fake, but for somebody whose calf was real, Burrow, the stuff that Jamar Chase is saying, like, don't show up before week 5. That might not be a dumb idea. Like, yes, you might be sacrificing seeding, but does seeding even matter in the AFC? Like, sure, if you get the number 1 seed, it's huge because it's a bye. Like, you don't have to play one of these murderers row teams in the playoffs. But anything outside of the number 1 seed, you're going to have to play them anyway. Let's just make sure that Joe Burrow is there when you're playing them.
Yeah, I think I said this a couple shows ago, whatever, but the 17th game plus the only one bye, because it's just harder to get, might make it more likely for teams to do that, to rest starters and say, the difference between seed 2 and 4 isn't that drastic. We're probably not going to get 1 because of this injury or whatever, and we don't want to risk, not making it, or losing in the first round like the Ravens last year.
Well, it's really tough because it's like an all or nothing proposition now. Like, you need the number 1 seed, otherwise seeding is basically irrelevant. Not entirely. There's still something to home field, blah, 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 but and where you have to go potentially with the other seeds. But those are so negligible compared with, I think, the risk of, losing one of these guys. It's like, the preseason debate. Is it worth playing your starters at all? Like, is the injury risk worth whatever marginal gain you get in knocking the rust off and, just trying to learn stuff about your offense, blah, blah, blah. Everybody has basically decided preseason it's not worth the risk. Now I think you're focusing on it with playoffs. You need those guys healthy, but that number 1 seed is still a really, really big carrot, because not playing, not having any risk whatsoever of getting dumped out by like an AFC wildcard team who could be really good.
While we're here, there were some offseason comments that I don't think I didn't address. I don't know if you did at all, but Orlando Brown Jr. saying something to the effect of, I'm blocking for Joe Burrow is different. You know where he's going to be in the pocket, or something to that effect. And I believe Chiefs fans got real offended by this, where, just to interpret what he's saying, like, it's true. He said he's going to be at a tighter depth, so it's like, quote unquote, easier to block for Joe Burrow than Patrick Mahomes. And it's like, yeah, there's truth to that. Mahomes drops back deeper than almost any quarterback in the league generally, and it makes it a little bit easier for edge defenders to just take this really wide arc around the edge. So it wasn't an insult thing that Orlando Brown Jr. is saying. So it's different blocking for Joe Burrow versus Patrick Mahomes. Easier in the sense that yes, you don't have to get as much depth. You don't have to worry about cutting a guy off who's trying to get to a 10-yard depth. You're trying to get him at 7 to 8. Just changes things a little bit. I think regardless of all that, I've been impressed with Orlando Brown. And I think when Chiefs fans didn't love him, a lot of it was because he looks bad, because sometimes Mahomes drops to 9 or 10 or 11 yards, and it looks like it's the left tackle's fault when it might not be. So Orlando Brown Jr. has been very good in multiple schemes, in Baltimore's run-heavy scheme, in Kansas City's pass-heavy scheme. I'm at the point where Orlando Brown Jr., I trust him as a good left tackle, and I think that's going to help a lot in Cincinnati.